Okay, so this screencast is going to look at just one aspect of QuickUI, which is scoping for style rules defined in a control's style tag. So it's pretty common when you're defining a control to want to be able to write the styling for that control without worrying about potential collisions between the names of the classes or element IDs that you're referencing in that style tag and the styles defined by other controls on the page. You want your controls to be as modular as possible, which means they should only affect the appearance and behavior of the elements that they contain and nothing else on the page. And to show that, we're going to look at a really simple page here. This page has two controls. One is called red and the other is called green. And those controls are pretty simple. They both have a message, piece of text with a particular element class here called message. The red class says that it wants all instances of message to be colored red. And the green class, not surprisingly, wants all instances of class message to be colored green. And if we flip over to the browser, this is what that page looks like. We're getting the result that we want. The question is, how is that actually working? Well, if we inspect this element in Firebug, we'll see that the first instance, the red control instance, its message is sitting inside of an element, a DOM element here, this div, and this is the top level div for that control instance. And it's got a class attribute stamped on it. This one says red and then control. So there's two classes that it's applying there. And this particular class attribute was stamped on this div by the QuickUI runtime library when the red control class was instantiated. What the runtime library does is it builds up a list of all the classes in a control's class hierarchy. And here that's just two classes, the red class we're defining and the base control class that all controls inherit from. And it applies that class hierarchy as a list of classes in the CSS class namespace. And if we look down here, we see a similar things happen with our green control, except here that's an instance of the green class, so it has green and then its parent class control. Now, the way that that's affecting the appearance of the page is that when the QuickUI compiler is processing quick markup, like this here, it takes the contents of the style tag and it creates an intermediate build file, a CSS file for each control class. So red.QUI will result in a CSS, corresponding CSS file called red.css. And this CSS file contains all the style rules we were just looking at with one important transformation. It's very simple, but it has a pretty important effect. And that is to prepend to all rules the name of the class that we're creating. This is the name of the JavaScript class, but it's also going to be used as the name of a DOM element class for CSS style rules. So that's what this dot at the beginning is doing for us. So it's saying that we only want elements of class message that are inside of elements of class red to be colored red. And similarly, if we look at green.css, we want elements of class message only if they're inside of elements of class green to end up with the color green. And so if we go back over to Firebug, we see here that this particular message, which is inside of a element of class red, in fact gets the style rule that we want just for that control. And if we look at the message for the other control instance, the green control, we see that it gets a green color applied to it because that message element is inside of an element of class green. So what this arrangement is doing is creating an implicit association between JavaScript control classes, JavaScript class names, and the CSS class namespace, which means that as you're creating your controls, any of the style rules you create here in a style tag, they're all going to get properly modified and will only apply to instances of the control class that that you're defining here. So these styles are only going to apply to elements of this control class, and these style rules are only going to apply to elements of this control class, even though they're referencing, say, the same class names or even IDs in the DOM. they're only going to apply the style rules to their own control contents. And this is a pretty contrived example, but it scales up pretty well. And it gives you a degree of freedom when you're writing controls to just focus on the styling of the controls content, and you don't have to worry about whether a control style is going to affect the appearance of anything else on the page. And this also works if you're sharing controls. If someone gives you control, you can drop it in your project and have confidence that everything's going to work as expected, and it's not going to interfere or collide with any of the styling that you've applied to the rest of the page.